Hello, I'm Sean Lean. I'm the President of the Legislative Council in the Victorian Parliament, and I'm here to give an update of this week's parliamentary sitting. First piece of legislation that was debated and passed through this chamber was the Gambling Legislation Amendment Pre-Commitment and Carded Play Bill. This bill establishes a framework for mandatory carded play and pre-commitment on electronic gaming machines and introduces a new spin rate limits for new electronic gaming machines. Second piece of legislation that was passed through this chamber was the Retirement Village Amendment Bill 2024. And what this bill does is improves the regulation of retirement villages, provides for regulation that anticipates further growth and innovation in the sector, and provides further protection of the rights and interests and needs of current and future residents. Another piece of legislation that passed this chamber was the Justice Legislation Amendment 2025. And this makes amendments to several acts, being the Crimes Act, the Criminal Procedure Act, and Justice Legislation Amendment Act. Some of the changes to those acts are quite minor, but some of them are actually really quite higher level in their importance. The last piece of legislation that was passed through this chamber was the Building Legislation Amendment Buyers Protection Bill. It introduces a developer's bond scheme for residential apartment buildings over 3 stories to be managed by the Victorian Building Authority, and it also strengthens that authority's powers, and so just mainly further protection for people that are acquiring builders to build themselves a property. 3 of those pieces of legislation, the first 3 were amended by this chamber, and the 4th one was not amended, but every piece of legislation had long committee stages in this chamber where the pieces of legislation can be dissected clause by clause and line by line if it's the will of the members of this chamber. There's always a lot of other issues debated other than legislation in the Parliament, and this week in the Legislative Council there was issues debated around the GP and health tax, the Great Outdoors Task Force, debate about drought support and school funding, and there was also a petition that was debated. People sign petitions and there is a number of MPs that sponsor those petitions, and if there's a certain number of signatures that triggers the debate in the Parliament, and this week's debate was a waste transfer station in Hampton Park. Always a lot happening outside the chambers during a Parliament week. There's always a lot happening at Victorian Parliament every week, but in sitting weeks it's always very busy. One of the events we had in Queen's Hall, which was pretty cool, was the Swinburne Space Showcase. So Swinburne University academics and experts were in our Queen's Hall showcasing the future of space research, technology, advanced manufacturing, including daily tasks, demonstrations and interactive experiences. And we really thank Swinburne for being in here and showing that particular industry, a growing industry that Victoria want to be involved in. Being Reconciliation Week, of course, members and staff attended in the Parliamentary Gardens, A Welcome to Country from Arnie Annette, and a performance from the Nun Kerry to the Stances. Great event, important event, and we're actually lucky. It was probably the only part of the week that the sun was shining here, so it worked out perfectly to be out in the gardens in a really important acknowledgement. And I just want to mention one thing, that a permanent thing in the Parliament where a plaque's been installed in the members' dining room acknowledging outstanding efforts from the parliamentary catering team and other parliamentary staff, I've got to say, that helped a range of charitable organisations to work together to prepare and distribute an unbelievable amount of meals, 1.8 million meals to people in need during unfortunately the time that the whole world was dealing with COVID. So that's a special addition to the Parliament, but I think it's an important one to acknowledge that you see members of Parliament talk about their achievements, but it's great to have a permanent marker highlighting an amazing achievement by the Parliament staff. Next sitting week, there's some pieces of legislation that came from the Legislative Assembly for us to debate, which includes the State Taxation Amendment Bill, the Appropriation Bill, and the Appropriation Parliament Bill. They're basically the bills that come out of the delivery of the budget. So next time we meet, I'll give you a rundown of how that went through this chamber.